take the lights for him now, so. Lights. Okay, Greg, we're all ready to kick off. So welcome, no development. This meeting is being held in the supper room of the Wayne Centre, 62 Borough, and via 48 conference. All members participate via video audio. Will count for the visitors of the elected forum. All 25B of 57 of the local government. This meeting is live stream now, so we'll get more. Please have one from Rebecca. I'm making that one up. I guess we could say he's here. Not good day. Yeah. So thanks for changing us. Of the mind or the body. Sorry. Right. Number 30 of people receive these following words. Right. Allison. Garrett, all in favour, so right. Do we have any conflicts? Public participation, there's none, so we've got no actions from it. Extraordinary business, no. So we do now move to A6, which is for confirmation. We're considering first up the 13th of July. Sorry. Any corrections? 2 months from the 13th of July. I'm not sure because we do the number. We need to pass it here. Someone like to move that they draw correctly. Alex, and we're all in favour of that. Yeah, right. Yeah, now about to consider the public excluded part of the 13th of July. We all read that. And what you say, we can. Yeah. Someone like I'll move the second it or over that. Oh, it was strong. That wasn't. Oh, I think fair enough. Right. You've got that there, you go there. Yeah, right. Sorry, we're on to moving on to information reports. C1, partnership and operations, amenities and roading. Some on screen, so someone would like to move that we send this report. And we'll over that. Now, Stephen, would you like to talk to them?
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I noted in the commentary again the headwinds that are facing the roading team, the challenges that we continue to face in roading and delivering our roading program. There is a combination of things at the moment making the life of the roading team very difficult. COVID obviously still with us and continues to interrupt staffing in the teams. The cost of materials is rising, sometimes 20%, sometimes 30%. In the absence of more budget, that just means less delivery. We have got, as you will all know very well, more frequent and more severe weather. This winter has been particularly wet with repeated, very heavy, unusually heavy rain. And the result of this is that we really are forced to focus on either emergency response, and this latest weather caused nearly $1 million worth of damage to our network, or urgent project work that sits underneath that, like the Hinkara Road repair and the big wall cuttings, footpath renewal, etc. What we're not getting to is the programmed work of renewals and maintenance that sits underneath that, the $4 million worth of regular work that we're supposed to be getting to. We really are focusing heavily on emergency response again and again, urgent project work, and then the teams, when they can, are getting to program work. So those are the headwinds that are currently being faced by the team. I only surface them again for you, so that in order to moderate expectation and to seek your understanding that at the moment it's not possible for us to get to all of the delivery that's expected of us in the roading program. That said, the team has been progressing well, I think. Emergency response has been excellent. We had a lot of communities cut off by the most recent event, 3 or 4. And we were able to clear those roads and reconnect those communities within a couple of days, even as the weather event was still on us. So I'm really happy with the performance of the team. They've been working very hard, very long hours, and that's Tom Langley and his team, but also the Fulton Hogan team underneath. So just want to acknowledge that at the outset. Otherwise, on roading, I'm happy to take the report as read, and Tim and I are both here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Look, before we go around the table, another thing we need to remember too, that you're under a hell of a lot of pressure, because this is not unique to the just everywhere. And also, I spoke with Tim yesterday about we only have to have another half an inch of rain, and we will be back to where we are, because the ground's that soft, it's just going to keep moving. And it's a bit like a drought. As soon as it rains, the drought isn't over. So it's the flip side of it, the hills are never going to bleed for a long time. So, right, Aaron.
Cool. Probably a question for Tim, if I could. Tim, can you hear me okay? Cool. So, with regards to culverts, I noticed that we've had 126 inspected. Are you able to let me know if those are in need of remedial work?
We inspect our culverts on a 2-yearly cycle, so that 126 or approximately was just a number due through normal routine programs. There's been a lot more inspected and blocked due to the last fortnight's weather. They are sitting in a program which will link to our emergency work funding request. To unblock a culvert inlet and outlet is in the vicinity of $150 odd each, and if we want to flush them out, you're looking at a couple of grand a culvert, due to importing specialist gear.
Is there an option that Fulton Hogan may have a capability issue of employing local contractors to assist them in the maintenance of the culverts? And the reason I asked this is right at the beginning of the triennium, council reiterated that culverts prevented damage, and in driving around, there are some waterways that really do need clearing out that are on council land. And the indication is it may take 7 to 8 months to get to it. Is that a possibility for Fulton Hogan to outsource?
That is a possibility. you just got to be aware of our budgetary constraints. We haven't got the luxury of keep this cash up our sleeves to do that. So the inspection regime identifies ones or condition of the culverts and ones in need of urgent work. And as you can appreciate, the inspection is just a snapshot on time. In the last couple of months, it can change overnight for a rain event. So they are functioning, and I think a lot of the issues are. Another issue is the maintenance of drains on private land. Doesn't sit within our mandate, but if they're not flowing properly, or not cleaned out or not maintained, it just slows the water discharge, and therefore things just silt up upstream further. So there's a bigger picture to everything, isn't there?
Oh, totally. What I was trying to get at, and don't want to belabor the point of that, I would assume that we have put aside a budget for culvert and drain on council land clearing. And much like we saw 2 years ago with footpaths, where Fulton Hogan had the budget but couldn't spend it because of capability. Is that the same within the roadside maintenance budget?
No, it's not. I think the next 11 months we're going to have to retard programs because the funds are not available. So it's the other way around.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, if I have a couple of questions. You mentioned the cost of materials going up, I presume, for the road here. That's directly attributable to not taking out of roads, I'm assuming, being worried about. Are we having this conversation with the regional council about access?
I could answer that. Certainly it is. There's an aggregate group being consulted with the regional council. The regional council controls this. And I think we're getting close to a resolution, and they are relaxing aggregate or take from rivers instead of a blanket ban. Then they're allowing removal from riverbeds again. But certainly the whole problem of aggregate is being addressed to the regional council.
So I can just add to that, and we've actually had a meeting with the quarry associations, and to see what the range of issues are. But in essence, the amount of demand for aggregate can't be just met from riverbed levels, and particularly that's sort of the alluvial end of the spectrum, and that is only certain road uses, whereas a number of other types of rock, merchant blue rock, all that type of stuff has to be imported and going out source locally to do that. So it's still coming over almost from China, demands from China. So yes, so we are moving through, but the analysis is correct, the regional council. But it's not an open slather into the river. It's at points where they need to manage the. I'm well aware of the river management. Past life, who knows? But the amount that has been coming back from extraction is creating this problem.
Yes.
And it has a flow effect. So we've been really much better on this council with the causes flow issues as well. And that leads me to my second question. You also mentioned that routine maintenance is sort of on the back burner because of obviously all and completely understandable. But at what stage are we worried that routine maintenance is going to fall into emergency works if we don't get it done? There's quite a bit of our routine maintenance that may well tip over into a different category because it's not getting done with these weather events.
I don't think that's the case. And I think we've seen locally and in the national media at the moment, the country's full of potholes, certainly due to the wet weather. They can be patched as a temporary fix, but the saturation of the pavement will lead to pavement deterioration over medium to long term. We will see an increase over the summer of pavement failures, especially sealed pavement failures. So we'll end up chasing our tail around that, and that can be directly attributed to the wet weather, but I don't think it'll fall into emergency type category.
The unknowns here, councillor, are obviously what further significant weather events we have this year, this winter, and the impact of that on us and our program. And secondly, how successful we are in applying for additional funding from Waikato to shore up our budgets.
Right?
Last question. The third one is you mentioned of outdoor cold flooding, so it's a little bit wider than that. Bringing the water races here as a prime example. Certainly around the Trinico area, south of that, a lot of the flooding was caused because the water races didn't have the capacity for the water because they're not being cleaned on private land appropriately. I think from my place, for example, we all around the house because it's breaching the facilities and the bricks because they're not being clean. The bylaw is very clear on owner responsibility for this. And we know that we had a lot of the notes about the weather event, but also it's a huge flooding which affects our roading network and as well. So at what stage do we need to go down the line of actually enforcement of the bylaw that says cleaning the bricks? What make weather events more outside?
The responsibility for ensuring that the network is properly managed and cleaned and available to users lies with Wellington Water Limited, as you know. And they are fairly vigilant in their inspection and communication with landowners. If there is an issue, they're communicating that to landowners. That isn't always the case that the landowner undertakes that work promptly. I have had several complaints about the water races overflowing over the past few weeks. And investigating them, I've noticed that some of them are due to lack of management, but some of them are actually due to just sheer volumes of water that we've been getting in this winter. And often it's difficult to attribute causally the reasons for the overflow. But certainly Wellington Water have been very prompt to, when notified, of getting out and solving the problem. Whether it's as proactive and precautionary as you suggested, councillor, I'm less sure of.
Can I just comment on that? I agree totally. As the water owner, Don's Creek was not overflowing, but the water races were, and it was the storm what coming through. And the Terranea overflow, real kind of it. And one would reflect that we'd actually diverted Longwood into Terranea that would may well have come down some of that flow.
So concrete was funded this probably the guys and Timmy probably knows they had to dig up the road to let the water out a little bit across the line, next one up closer to the state highway. First line down, I know from the Tin Hut through to the power station line. Along there was rural roads up there.
Yeah, that's not feeding up to Terranea.
No, that's feeding this.
Yeah, yes, which on the outside of the long side was feeding up to. So yeah, this is what we want.
And that's that is also, of course, complicated by the fact that landowners are prohibited from diverting the flow of water courses under our bylaws, even though diverting them in the way that it's been done in the Moroa example was a sensible and effective way of solving the problem. So, you know, there are some complications there. I think we're aware of them, and recent conversation in the Water Races subcommittee surfaced a lot of this for us about improving the way we manage and considering where the location of that management should rest.
So this kind of layouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all pretty happy with what you're doing.
All right, great. And amenities, Chair, if I could just briefly mention that amenities. There's an abbreviated report in amenities, I'm afraid. The team's been without a manager, and so there's a smaller report. I would just like to let the committee know that James O'Connor has joined the team as manager from this week.
Well, James.
And so we now have management in the team, and James has made a really good start and looks forward to working with those of you who continue through to the next training.
I did say to James when I met him that Bryce, when he came here, had a full set of hair. I think, sorry. Right. Now we go into C2.
So we must say, Tim, you guys done a great work over that storm event. I think you pass on to the team and to the full.
Yeah.
Amazing work to keep the network open as well as you did. Thank you.
Great. There was one point you want to think about too, that all the roads, coastal roads that were closed during this storm event, cover surveys, roads data, albeit one way. Just a bit of an update on that. Was the problematic areas of the Channels Bay to start around maybe the weekend or September. Trial. Yeah.
Just after Labour weekend, going well.
Fingers crossed for you, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, it's very weather dependent. And you know, the success the Whangarangi shows it could achieve a good result.
Oh, just one other comment that was raised by the with me by a member of the public was the new septic tank installed at Naui appears to have some connection issues with regards to stormwater running through, and it tends to be bogging in. So just wondering whether you could possibly look at that.
We can take it as an issue.
It's up here. Yeah. Just
Right. Okay. We're now partnerships and operations board report. If someone like to move that we achieve that contract, I'll check it out. All in favour? Right, here again, it's you still there.
Yes, thank you through your chair. So this reporting period has been quite a lot happening in the water space. The reset of the Featherston wastewater treatment plant consent project has been completed. We've had meetings with GWRC. We've had some meetings with Manawhina on site, and governance has met twice actually in the period that this report covers. You'll remember that we Horipo and Ra wasn't on site at Featherston. Just yeah, just trying to. We wanted to get. They wanted to give us their full understanding of the geography of the site, and it wasn't an opportunity to have just another relationship meeting because Robin Wells, the new principal advisor for water transition, was able to go down and be part of that meeting.
Yeah, so just last time I asked, we only had Whangatangi representation and 44 we came out to minutes, so it's great to get it that way. Yeah.
Governance for the project has been really much improved, I think. And part of the reason for that is having Narita on governance. She's really added a voice there for us, not just for Manawhina, but a local voice. And one of the outputs that we promised council from the reset was more regular communication, more quality information. Now that is to be achieved through a monthly report that comes out of governance. Unfortunately, the report came to me a couple of days after the due date for papers for this committee, but I have circulated it to you informally. It's this document here. This document will be refined, and it'll be the basis for our communication with you on a monthly basis. Even if you're not meeting, it will be sent to you monthly, and it will also be attached to the water report that comes to this committee.
Will that also be going to the boards?
Our intention actually is to publish this on our website so that we are giving the public quality information as well, regular quality information.
It's really sensible, just to let people know.
Yeah.
It's easy for them.
I just thought it might be, as a courtesy, we might provide it to councillors first and then publish it sooner.
Yeah, great.
Other issues of note in the water space was the meeting of the Water Races Subcommittee. The subcommittee met and considered the impact of new regulation on the water races network, that being stock exclusion, but also water quality, land management, and water management. The committee also considered briefly where the location for the management of water races would be best be. In the council, or remaining in Wellington Water Limited for some time until reform happens. And their preliminary decision, I guess, was that we should leave it with Wellington for the time being while we explore and confirm exactly what's needed to make a successful transition into council. Because ultimately, of course, management of the water races will come back to the council when Three Waters reform happens and Wellington Water Limited is disbanded, as it were. That function will return to us. So the advice of the Water Races Committee was that we should take some time while we have it to plan that transition and make sure that it's sufficient. Look, other than that, there is the only other thing for you, I think, would be we could briefly quickly through Robin Wells on an update on the Three Waters reform process. If councillors thought that was a good use of time. But I think those three things are probably the headlines for water, for our water. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Just one thing, Stephen, 2.2, the federal supply on. How are we getting on with the engineering design for
So there's two issues there, Chair. One is the Donald's Creek pump station and our ability to fund that renewal in this financial year, starting this financial year. And the second one is the I&I impacts on the whole project. So if I could just take those one at a time.
Yep.
As has been discussed in full council, we are very aware of the fact that the Donald's Street pump station is a critical part of solving some of the problems that we're experiencing regularly in Featherston. Problems of sewage overflow and flooding that are causing a lot of distress and anxiety amongst the Featherston public. So we understand that that's a critical piece of technology that needs to be upgraded as soon as possible. It isn't currently budgeted in this financial year, but we are, as a priority, having conversations with Wellington Water about how we start that project this year, how we move funds, how we move priorities around in order to do that. So the message from management is that we are very, very aware and we want to start that project as soon as we can. But we're just figuring out exactly how we can do that.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Chair. Yes.
On the Featherston I&I.
Yeah.
We allocated a chunk of money through the stimulus money to INI a couple of years ago, and I thought we'd made good progress, but we're now seeing that we need to increase it. How have we, has there been a calculation of the effect of INI on the Featherston wastewater treatment plant as it is at the moment? And how, because I thought we'd already looked at it, but there's quite a bit of it.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're correct that a couple of years ago, when we did some IMI work, we modelled the impacts that we were hoping to have, and then we modelled after them, and there was a reduction. Since that time, the situation has worsened, and recently, the volumes that we have been getting into the plant are extremely high, higher than the high rate that they were previously. We don't know what's causing that, and we're looking at getting some urgent advice, and it may not be modelling per se, it might just be investigation to understand why we're getting this sudden flux of stormwater into the system, because it is having a significant impact on the plants, and of course it connects directly to the design, the capacity and cost of the consent project. It's definitely on our radar. It's been the subject of conversations with Wellington Water this week. I believe the cost of doing that kind of work is around $50,000, which may not seem like a lot, but at the moment, with the way budgets are, it actually is a lot. And so we need to sit down with Wellington Water and make sure that there's agreement that this is a priority among other priorities. Yeah.
Thank you.
2.4, with regards to the non-water plant notice. I'm just throwing that up because I'd like to know what Wellington Water put in place from 2019, when we had the first lot of go out the Ramahana River. And so they were already looking, they came to us and told us that there was work that needed to be done. What have they put in place that now isn't working? Or have nothing been done, and is that why we now have an abatement notice?
So I could help, so Stephen wasn't around at the time, so the two issues with the discharge into the Ramahana were there's the faulty valves.
Yeah.
And there was also the need to have redundancy, so that the system did not rely on that valve. And so those things have been done and corrected. The abatement notice is a different matter. So the abatement notice is around the compliance in general with the consent conditions for that plant. So they're not about one-off discharges or those types. So and the conditions as we explained at the time, the management regime for that plant is very, very difficult because of the saturation of the disposal areas, which will make us very vulnerable to loading rate non-compliance in terms of discharge into the soils. We also have the ability in high flow in the river to discharge to the river treated as a compensation treatment. So that plant and none of our plants have ever been compliant with all the conditions all the time of our consents. And we advise the council of this regularly aware of this. So we're currently working through a management plan to see what we can do in terms of the operating framework that the plant works under. For instance, you might recall Jeremy Gibbon talking around. So one of the things in the consent condition sets a loading rate in terms of effectively the amount of nitrogen that's allowed to be loaded on the soils from the travelling irrigator. So it's a loading rate. At the time, he was talking about we want to be able to change that to a deficit loading rate model, which is a change to consent. So there's a number of options here about how we manage the consent, which is just straight about putting in infrastructure and most part of the but I just stress with everything, right? And so, an abatement just isn't appropriate action for the regional council. They have a regulatory responsibility to make sure that we are doing the right thing. And they've given us good lead time, so we can manage the plan to be able to come back to the lead that year. So when we have that, we'll try to get it.
Okay, so what we have got money aside for treatment plants, so that's why it would be just be great to know.
So sorry, just to be correct. So we've put aside the need to operate plants. We haven't put that aside any significant funding capital that is required to improve the performance of the plant. And so if we have to do much capital, then there will be, that would be how much expenditure. So we have to be very careful to make sure we get the right balance between what we get between our ability to operate the plants, and that may require actually requesting a change in terms of the consent conditions. But as they're written now, we're not required some extent from time to time, and it's usually to do with
Anne would also have a question to that. So we were advised halfway through our annual plan that they'd finally finished an audit of our 3 wastewater treatment plants. They found that 10 years council had ignored requirements at the time of the consent that they had to fix. So I had quite a vigorous discussion at the Water Commission meeting, because Wellington Waterloo turned around and said, South Ryde District Council have not allocated money to fix this problem. And I said, the reason we haven't allocated money is because you haven't given us a detailed rectification plan with dollars attached. My question is, have Wellington finally given us a costing to rectify the timings of that?
Wellington Water has been very good at identifying the range of factors at each plant that need remedification in order for us to get back into consent. And they've let us all know that through webinars and reports to committee and council. Desludging the ponds, which have been done since the 80s, screening, UV. There's a massive list of things which need to be done to each plant in order to bring it into compliance, which tallies very, very considerable sum per plant. What we don't have yet, and we're working through, is what you are talking about, which is within a fiscally constrained environment with X amount of money, what would we focus on first, and how would that be regarded by the regulator? Are we putting together a management plan that addresses criticalities with the amount of money that we've got available to us, and is that acceptable to the regulator? That's exactly the conversation that we need to have, and that we are having as part of this process of understanding where we sit with the regulator on each of the plants. So the abatement notice, though it's concerning, is actually just part of an ongoing dialogue that we're having with the regulator on exactly where we need to get to on each of these plants. Now, I'm conscious that Gary Cullen is in this meeting. I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth, Gary. I just want to confirm with you that that's your understanding as well.
That is my understanding, but I'd have to go back and get the details. I haven't been directly involved in that, but I can take an action to a way to go and get the detail on the current position. Yeah.
So to give you an idea, when we looked at what we were presented with the budget for rectification, I think there's a line item of $5.2 million for retention ponds, some stage between 2024 and 2032. That is not a figure we could put into an LTP. So this was my problem with Wellington Water's approach. So hopefully we can get that right.
I was like, well, actually, help to show you where the main issues are, surely.
So the nature of abatement notice is it's quite simple. It's not an engineering specification about what should be done. It just simply says that these are the conditions that you are not complying with. Give us an engineering plan to tell us how you're going to meet those conditions.
Yes, well, that's right, that's what I did.
Yeah, just a couple of more questions. We've documented, we discussed the project management. Is this something you are have?
Yeah,
Is anything that said you've changed some of the rest? Like, you have a little concern at the start.
now, Councillor, just thank you for your question. Just to note that this Peterson Wastewater Treatment Plant consent project report hasn't been tabled with this committee. So you've received it informally because I wanted you to have it as soon as I got it. But it doesn't form part of this report. That said, but there's no procedural reason why I shouldn't answer questions.
No, I'm saying some of the things there you can see today.
Yeah.
Have changed what was in the initial project management.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was my question.
It is a living document,
Right.
and we're seeking
Because I had concerns right at the start about the governance structure, you would see it was placed there, now you're sitting here, marriage standards, and you take it on board, that they were not included in the original document.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, I did meeting with Pearson Community Board and marriage standards. A number of questions you raised, it's not, it's issue of marriage standing. Now, I just wondering, is it time?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about the project management plan,
That's right.
not the report.
No.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Start again. No, and this is what you got.
No, the project management plan is finalised and has been adopted. So that document is the project management plan for the consent project.
So marriage standing, but you're still not on.
You may not be looking at the final copy of the document.
What was stated that he had a TUI?
Yeah, who next week
Yeah.
to discuss this document.
All right, no, there is a HUI proposed at Papawai Marae on the 1st of September. And the purpose of that HUI is to sit down with the council management team and the Wellington Water team and talk about water in a holistic way across the road, and how Māori interest and how mana whenua regard water holistically as a concept, to understand how we might be giving effect to mana o te wai as a framework underpinning decisions, and to it's a bit of an educated inform and an outreach opportunity to talk about wastewater 101, for example, drinking water 101. So, Councillor, it's my understanding of the purpose of that meeting is that it's to get to know you, talk about water in a holistic sense, and it's about relationships and understanding the bigger picture.
Okay, my point being, you just a minute ago said marriage standing is now got a place in governance,
Yes, it does.
but not in this organisation.
It may not be in the version that you've got in front of you, but I'll make sure that I get you an up-to-date version that reflects the governance constitution, because Nelly is of course a member of the governance commission.
She was not on the stock. Okay. Well, that's fine.
So I'll
All right, so just the other point on that, there's some committee board also asking questions about the stock as well. So they need an updated version, because this one is dated April 2019.
it's taken
And I think
into
that's the
circulate
version.
the new.
I think the version's bringing it up or what?
I suppose the purpose of the monthly project reports is to, in essence, update that project plan as we develop some of the details from that project plan. So we can go ahead and then take our monthly project reports And as we finalise our consenting strategy and finalise our communication strategy, we can addend them to that report. We just haven't closed that.
Yeah. My point is, there any point in the community board meeting to discuss this document? If there's no point, if there's no possibility of change it.
It would probably be more useful for them to receive project updates to see where we currently stand on the project and have a discussion about it.
Yeah, because they are considered stakeholders. They see themselves as stakeholders. Kids do see themselves as stakeholders. They're not included.
They are certainly included in the communication strategy about enterprise and strategy and so we have updated in that document since we're going to develop communication strategy. We now develop that and they are specifically mentioned.
So that answers your question, it's a little bit of-
It is a really document. It can be changed. Thank you. That was my point. And that's what I'm saying. If there's any point in changing it, so moving on from there, the I&I situation. Exactly. Wake Street updated $1 million and it's supposed to take 35% of the total load going through. Obviously it did. And I think what Wilson said, this refers all back to the document, 2013 document, which had all that stuff laid out. And in there it said the problem was that we were actually starting at the end of the problem, not starting. So in fact, we fixed the pipe in Wake Street, right? We haven't yet gone back, and I think we should get back up the line, see where these other problems are further back up the line. All we've done is fix that last run, Wake Street to Longwood. Problems will be there. I encourage that we can go back to this, say if you can. Thank you.
the new document.
Can we go back to 2.4 to the number development notice, please? Perry, can you tell me, are you saying that what was in the abatement notice was incorrect from the issuance of the consent? Are you saying that there was things when the consent was issued that were not fixed or had a time frame within them that had to be fixed and have never been fixed? Or are you saying that they were fixed and now they're not compliant? I just don't quite understand.
Bit of all of the above. So if we start back, when the original consent was granted, it assumed some design features inside the market for a wastewater plant, which weren't put in place. So an example of that would be something like an inlet screen. And an inlet screen takes out things like nappy liners, wet wipes, all those types of things. And so that it doesn't create literally a downstream issue when it needs to put up and pick up seasons and during the moment. So there were things, design features that were contemplated in the original to be part of the engineering of the plant that would mean those conditions would be met. Some of those things haven't met in the place. Okay. So to that first. So we also have had some physical issues which we're aware of, like the before we reported we've had problems with that with the manufacturer, we think it's faulty and those types of things. So there's definitely some engineering components with the plant that will need to be done. What I was referring to is that we may be applying for changes to the consent to allow a better management regime for things like the loading rates from the equipment that's on the store. So the consent requires a certain method and measures that. We think there may be a better solution. It still gets the same environmental response, but we still can manage the plants better. And we're at any time we're able to apply for a change to a consent. That's the process to follow that. Sorry, can I answer you?
Yes, that answers the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, is twofold. If we can't meet the requirements under the abatement notice by the date due, what is the level of fines in Greater Wellington bonds?
So there's two courses of action that a regulator can do. So they can either escalate the, sorry, I'll just explain. So there's fines and prosecution, which are infringements and to take a prosecution through the courts. But that is not an instruction to fix something. So there's in the RMA, there is starts with an abatement notice, the lowest form of instruction to do something, and it's a civil instruction from the regulator.
So there's no cost apart from the appeal.
That's right. But then what the if the regulator feels we're not complying with an abatement notice, we can either be infringed or prosecuted. If the regulator thinks that we're not taking this seriously at all, then they can escalate the matter to the court for an interim enforcement order or full enforcement order, which is a court direction. So there's a difference between a civil instruction, which is still legal, it's still a legal instrument, and a court directed. So the path, so first of all, we are going to make sure we have compliance. Short of acts of God and those types of things we're doing from time to time. If we're not, I would suspect that the regulator would infringe us, will take a prosecution. If they still think we're, but that doesn't give instruction to fix. So it could escalate up to enforcement orders and enforcement orders. But right now we're at the bottom end of that path.
I realise that when we're at the first of what I call the first stage of it. But just to give me an idea, is it a $10,000 fine, is it a $100,000 fine? What level are we? Or what?
You can't tell. So under the RMA, any offence is a strict liability offence. So the first thing is, as long as it's proven that offence occurred, then the court makes a finding you're guilty or not. The second process is deciding what level of action the fine will occur as a result. So, and that relies on a number of legal factors the court will take into account in this sentence. And so, if you're at the high end, that's someone who ignores it, it's not doing anything, it is not admitting guilt, not doing anything, and that can go up to over $500,000. Okay. If you, at the other side, if you admit this is not happening, you admit guilt, get on with it, you're fixing it, you can be right at the very low. Very low. Yeah.
Thank you. It's the following part of that is if you do a variation to what they're actually asking or to change there, is there a new consent process? And if so, does that have a bit to it as well?
It is, yes, it's a change to the current consent. It's not a new consent process. And it's a much faster pathway. For instance, you're only required to consult with people who are affected by the change that you're applying for. So, for instance, in the case of loading acts, then it would be neighbours in terms of odor, spray drinking, those types of things. So it's not a whole new consent.
Thank you. Then the final thing on that, sorry. Could we please put this on the risk register?
Yes.
It is a big risk, financially and reputationally.
Yeah. So we already have on our risk register regulatory failure. So that is what all the ongoings to make sure that that's subset.
So that it's got a line of its own. Yes, thank you.
Stephen's actually got a comment on.
No, that's fine. No, thank you. These are all good questions for each year. So just in relation to the abatement notice we've received now, we've had it for 3 working days. The legal and specialist team at Wellington Water is currently verifying it, so we have to be sure that everything that we're being asked to do and that the facts in the abatement notice are actually correct. So it does need to be verified. I also would say that the way that the regulator has been approaching this has been very good. You know, we got notice of it in advance. They've said we're really keen to work with you. We want to understand what steps you're taking. Those deadlines there are firm, but if you're not meeting them for any reason, let us know or have a conversation. We're they've been very supportive and very constructive in the way that they are approaching this. And we will, of course, be working on this as a priority. The effect on the environment and the potential effect on human health or animal health is of absolute top priority to us. And so we'll be working with the Wellington Water Limited teams to put a response together by the due date of 1 December and a plan in place that hopefully gets us back into compliance by August 2023 as instructed.
So you got time.
2 days.
2 days. Thank you.
But I think it's a very important element, and that people will be concerned if this non-compliance means that there's an increased risk to public health. And so that's why I stress we have not been compliant for the same reason since the plant has been operating. So the actual impact on public health would be 0, because it would be all the elements that we're not complying with relate to ammonia, dissolved oxygen, all those types of effects onto land. Nothing is irrigated to land or discharged into the river without having ultraviolet disinfection, and don't have compliance issues with the ultraviolet disinfection. So there's no bacteria. That's the thing that I want to, if that's where your public health risk comes from. So there's no in the non-compliance, there is no bacteria that's being released to the environment.
Do we have a budget to upgrade?
No, we don't. This is the issue. Yeah.
So if it's unbudgeted, does it can change the timing, so until we get the budget, the cost of the way, we can't even look at what goes first, what goes second.
In the same way, by the way.
Yeah. And on the right side, where the majority of concern is, it's around ammonia. So, and again, the original plant design contemplated some form of treatment of ammonia, which is essentially where your nitrates or your risk is to aquatic that produces algae streams. So the great side is we're trialing a technology based on the MBPR, which is a technology that potentially could be used in Martinborough to meet that design. There is no design that allows that to happen in a mechanical sense. So in Martinborough, it relies on soil removing ammonia as part of the treatment process. So the bright side, we're actually trying some technology now that might give us an idea of affordable solutions to some of these things. Just to give you some driving through. Should be very soon. Well, the early indications are talk to the consultants because we're at the lowest you can possibly actually through any form of treatment. So that will be really good results. Yeah, are we expecting this on notice? If they could arrive at any time, we haven't had the indication as yet.
So that's by that I mean the same sort of period. Yeah. Exactly. So highly likely that they're just really extremely.
It's
No, because right now we're operating at
So close.
I'm
not sure that they that's not good. That's misleading.
Yes. That's why we're That's not the
Okay, guys, well, I'm moving on. So,
that's the question on water rights.
yeah,
Okay, so water rights. Well, really interesting, we've already got one application closed. And my question is around our relationship with the regional council on the water. If our water prices are put in with the right purpose of stock, fencing it off goes against the prime purpose of the water race. At what stage, so Wellington, now I may be wrong, but Wellington Water is concerned with water in and the quality of the water out the other end of it. What right do they have to manage a bit in the middle? It's not a natural waterway. Exactly, it's not a natural waterway, it is an artificial waterway which we put in. So they certainly have a right to say what's the discharge quality like at the other end and how much water we can take out the front. Where is their right to tell us what we do in between two?
I think
Also the natural resources plan. So the natural resources plan. It's not a natural resource. It's a. So you asked. It is their right to take it from inlet to discharge and relies on, and their right arises from the a different view about whether it should be in the natural resources plan or not, but this. And the natural resources plan sets a range of descriptors of waterways. So, a natural stream, blah, 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 a modified water course, etc. And so it is captured. And so part of the debate is whether it's a modified water course or there's another classification. Yeah, so there is a classification. And that classification means that you can do more in a modified water course or an artificial waterway in terms of managing it than you can in the stream. So it actually means that we in certain circumstances, we're still working the street and go and clear stuff out of it and do abandon, clear stuff without the need for resource consent and so forth. So it does create a level of emission that is far greater than it was treated as a natural resource.
And that has been currently examined. So I asked the question at the Warwick committee meeting, and they are in process for designating or a survey to give us an answer on what they are. So we're just going to wait.
So if I just get a little further here, this is right. This is something. The bylaws that deal with our water races currently have a specific line that says soccer cannot be litter. Is it legal? Is it legal?
Only one of them.
people will just stop.
Okay, so the issue to my mind has only come about because of the intensification of but the problem seems to be that we have never enforced the bylaw that says they cannot live.
It's through you, Chair. It's a totally new regime, Councillor. It's a part of the government's implementation of essential freshwater EPS regulation throughout the country, and it reflects new rules that prohibit stock from accessing waterways that are defined in certain ways, and this includes the water races. So irrespective of whether the water race ends up being categorised as an artificial waterway or a natural, stock will still be required to be excluded from that water, because that water still carries nutrient load, pathogen and sediment to the river, which is the subject of the new control. Now, what we don't understand yet, if you'll just forgive me for a moment, what we don't understand yet is what kind of flexibilities exist in the implementation of the stock exclusion that might allow landowners to continue to use the water races for the purpose for which they were built? Is there a ability for stock to access them, for example, just to drink, but not to go through them? We know also that it's contemplated that where possible, water will be able to be pumped out of the water race and put into troughs, and stock will be able to access it that way. But that rests on the availability of water in the water race. So these are the sort of things that we're trying to understand. Stock exclusion is a fairly clear set rule, and the only way you can overcome that is to understand flexibilities and how you can water stock through over fences. The classification of the waterways as a natural and artificial waterway, that relates to how you guard it, how you manage it, whether you can only use a certain type of digger head to clear weeds in order to preserve fish passage, whether you can actually clear it like a drain and just get in there with a digger and clear the thing. These are the small differences that will be made to the management or ongoing management of the races from that definition.
So the logical thing here, and I know there is no compensation for farmers who are included. The rules are currently talking 5 metres either side, 5 metres from the middle of the waterways. So if I take one of my neighbours, for example, he's got 10 kilometres of waterways. So you do your math and say how much land is he having effectively taken out of this farm?
But we can't influence that.
But so let's go to logical things. So the fence there, he's looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $150,000 just fence it. And I know the regional council got system cost, but even if they do 50%, it's still $75,000 he's up. And then he's got to have a water treatment, a water system to water the stock, which is another $150,000 to $200,000. So at what stage is he going to sit down and go, actually, all those are there?
But with respect, councillor, that is the situation that every farmer in New Zealand currently finds themselves.
Absolutely.
That's the price that's being paid for improvement.
So the way you improve the water quality of those water races is not the water. So take that language back and say, do that, because no matter what you do, it's not good.
That was the case in last 3 or 4 years, a redundant waterway. No one wants it. They are not allowed to close it because it's got its own ecosystem. And that will happen here.
And this is the absolute stupidity of this whole discussion.
Can I suggest, Mr. Chair, that this is more a conversation and ask to come to the waterway subcommittee meeting, and so that a more succinct report will come to the essence and services rather than take it twice. Or there's a conversation with the combined council meeting.
That'd be the only one.
Yes,
We're explaining their policy and their policy. It's just how we be better to have that conversation. And ask us, we as a council push back on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's right, but it needs to go to a higher body. Discuss because as I said before, we can't influence what they will.
We can push back on this council.
Yeah, so I doubt that we will collectively through a combined council, we could have.
Just to make one final, hopefully final point. Management is certainly seized of the users' interests here, and we are pushing back and asking for as much information as we can get in order to influence, when we can, decisions that are being made. We've been doing it all along, and Robin and Colin and I have been very vocal in representing users' interests and influencing the process where we can, where certain points still remain that haven't been made. So we're not, just to reassure you, councillor, we're not accepting any of this, we're not throwing our hands up in the air. But where decisions still remain to be made, we will certainly be influencing those towards our users.
Well, you know, take this logically, you go. 20 kilometres for the rest of Aurora and.
Yeah, well, we can all do the stuff for that. Everyone. I think we do. I see your point on two about the aerial water survey. Roll on summer.
Yeah, it's better. Oh, it's gonna be great.
Now move on to C3, item report. Someone can move that the executive report. I'll move it with the executive. All the way, just one further word because we jumped off now, but with regards to through the water. Yes, we've got Robin here with the council. Let's feel the need in Monday. But I could also mention that I have a booking on Monday at 12:30 in person to submit to the parliamentary subcommittee, select committee on it. I will distribute. I'm not going to read the submission of the report, but I'll certainly be distributing the points are we making in person.
How many submissions were submitted? Just
88,000, of which
he's 79,000.
So being a sleeper will be very select.
Yeah.
Cool. Robin, do you want to give us any more to later on three waters?
If you'd like me to give you an update, I certainly can.
Yes.
Councillor, thank you. Stephen, for asking me to update you more on the report. At this point, we and the other NTC councils have been trying to develop our internal plans to transition in the absence of a detailed scope, budget and timeline on the National Transition Unit, except what was included in the water supply entity bill, which is currently in the Select Committee. We're hoping for some clarity on the scope and timeline in a roadshow that's been scheduled by the National Transition Unit, and it's now been confirmed for us to be on the 6th of September. And capacity. In terms of budget for what it's going to cost us and our advisors limited transition, we have so far received some funding and extra transition support funding, not 350,000. That agreement's been signed and we announced our first members on that, so we've successfully applied for that funding. But in the absence of a detailed plan, we don't have clarity of the budget requirements to actually deliver. To this point, we are currently assessing a request for information from the Transition Unit Asset Management Planning Group around capital renewals and financing forecasting work, their work stream, and the consequent proposal from Wellington Water Limited for additional funding to support this request and position the Wellington Water Limited Shareholder Councils. So that's in a highly constrained environment, what is all the capital that we'd like to spend in the next few years, and we will use that to do some financial forecasting and do some evaluation.
What's quite vague, who do you think
You know, this is the National Transition Unit. It appears the National Transition Unit is asking us to engage in a more compressed process than the usual council process. And now we have that request, we can test what impact that request has on the usual business of our council. So we've still got that going on as well. We are uncertain at this stage what the impacts, the other work streams, debt, finance, legal, commercial, and all of that will also have on our business. This will no doubt emerge in the coming months. So that will allow us to develop plans and increase the confidence and understanding the risks to council. So up to this point, we haven't had a lot of detail. Hopefully we'll get some clarity on the 6th of September. There'll be a lot of impacts and there'll be a lot of need for transition finance support of which we currently have only been allocated. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
It's a big bill coming up
There's going to be some policy,
before Christmas.
they were saying Christmas, but we've seen nothing on the new bill as yet. And there was going to be some advice, but we haven't seen.
It's a really interesting way to explain it, because it's all very well giving us some money, but if it's not like we're going to employ someone in finance and assets and in leasing and everything to actually do the work. So the money means nothing. It's the capability of council to react to an urgent demand.
And our partners, Roberts and Washington.
Can we not be working with local councils, local councils?
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
specific.
We sit on a, there's an entity group, okay, steering committee, working group. And then within that, there is, Wellington Water shareholder councils, and we all work together as well. So yes, we are absolutely working at multiple levels, and then there's various working groups and other groups that have been, as well.
Right. Any further questions for Rob?
Robin has made an immediate impact and has been representing us in all of these different fora extremely well. And we will be providing an update to this committee. Should it continue, we'll be providing an update to this committee each time we meet on free waters. In the coming months, you'll have a little bit more of a written report, and we can supplement that with some commentary from Robin as well. But Robin will be leading that work. Thank you.
Right. I'm sorry.
Stephen is welcome going to the. I was, so I could have asked, just you and Harry going down.
Okay, we've had, we received the action item report. So here we go again, action item. Do we have any item? Clarification on our action items, where we are. Pretty well brought us up to speed with most of them. Stephen, and your name to beside them all pretty well. Oh. 116. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 162 with regards to the pedestrian crossing. It's action that I noticed that we've got this providing a community board information. However, I noticed it's looking fantastic.
Yes.
I just need to double check if there is an allowance for a footpath on the south side of the road from the pedestrian crossing to the.
That's that. It was, yes, sir, but it's not delayed as the weather, so they can sort of come to the site.
I can see it in the previous report, but I wasn't as it was specific.
Your question is, we got the data.
On the pedestrian crossing, no, I don't. Tim, do you have any more on the timing of completion of that pedestrian crossing?
At the moment, the resources have been tucked away to the emergency works, as we said before. So as soon as we free up and ensure the wider community is provided safe and secure access, they'll be back.
Yeah.
I mean, thanks, you've done a terrific job so far, Tim, that's great.
Stephen, on number 15. Are you going to include the discussion now standing on the here again? That's something. 1.5. It just seems to, I've been to the discussion, and I think that the feeling was, you know, the entirety of it, not just picking out wastewater. I think Tirraniki, I think, is included at the same time. Be good boost. Cultural concerns.
Well, are you referring, sorry, Councillor, are you referring to the 1st of September, Hui on Hawaii?
Yeah.
Yeah, would certainly be a discussion item, yes.
But I think that.
Yes, yes, certainly.
Chippy, sorry, I came a little late, but I was in discussion around the dollars for your conversation. Yes. Oh, okay, thank you.
All done.
As I'm just getting close now, I was before, right, you had the updates on the water survey.
Oh, yes, and that we've got it as a recurring action item on the county as a whole. Okay, guys,
Just sorry, Chair, through you, I just wanted to say, if I'm not called on again to speak, that it's been a pleasure working with you. I understand this is the last Ethics and Services Committee meeting with this training, so I just wanted to say thank you. It's been good working with you, and I look forward to working with you again if you reappear in the next training. Thank you.
I won't be.
Yeah, I just said, Stephen, so thanks, Stephen. Chippy, this is your last. Not seeking. And over the years, I've worked pretty closely with Chippy, and I certainly like to do that. As not only as chair of this, but as a fellow councillor, I certainly like to acknowledge your contribution to this committee and also to this council. So thank you.
But I assume you'll be allowed to action, thank you. I don't know whether I want to. Bye, guys.